Eli walked slowly down the quiet streets, his stomach twisting in knots of hunger. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if his own body was trying to stop him from moving. Life had not been kind to him, and at this point it felt like kindness was something he could only see in stories, not in the real world. He had no home to go back to, no family waiting to welcome him with warm meals or comforting words. Each day seemed like a fight just to survive, and he was tired of losing. The morning sun was soft, but it did little to lift his spirits. Eli had been wandering for hours, looking for a place that might offer him something to eat, even if it was just a small meal. Most people walked past him without noticing, or if they did, they looked away quickly, not wanting to be reminded of the struggles that existed just outside their own lives. The streets smelled faintly of bread from nearby bakeries, but the smell only made his hunger worse. He wrapped his thin jacket tighter around himself, feeling the chill of the autumn air bite through the fabric. As he turned a corner, Eli noticed a small cafe tucked between two larger buildings. The wooden sign above the door was painted in warm colors, and the windows were clean, showing people inside enjoying their meals. He paused, unsure if he had the courage to enter. Pride and desperation warred inside him. Finally, he took a deep breath and stepped closer, his shoes scuffing the pavement. Eli lingered near the entrance, watching the customers inside. They laughed, spoke in soft tones, and shared food that seemed so far out of his reach. He could feel his stomach twisting again, his body begging for something to eat. He swallowed hard, trying to calm the tremble in his hands. With a shaky voice, he asked the woman behind the counter, "Ma'am, I'll work for food. Anything, really. I just need something to eat." The woman paused, her hands frozen mid-motion as she wiped a glass. She looked at him quietly, her eyes soft but curious, studying him like she could see the years of struggle etched into his face. She was older, with silver streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of experience and patience. There was no anger or annoyance in her expression, only a calm that made Eli feel both nervous and hopeful at the same time. "Work for food, you say?" she asked gently. Eli nodded, feeling a flush of embarrassment at having to admit his desperation. He had expected to be turned away immediately, to hear a sharp word telling him he couldn't stay, but instead she simply nodded and said, "All right, come inside." As he stepped over the threshold, Eli felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. The warmth of the cafe hit him instantly, a sharp contrast to the cold streets outside. The smell of fresh bread, coffee, and cooked vegetables was almost overwhelming. He felt his mouth water, and for a moment he almost forgot about the nerves twisting inside him. He was given an apron and a small broom, and instructed to start sweeping the floor. It was hard work, but it felt good to be doing something useful instead of just standing there helpless. Hours passed quickly, though Eli barely noticed. He moved from sweeping to wiping tables, from cleaning dishes to restocking supplies. Every task was small, but each gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The woman watched him closely, occasionally offering quiet guidance on how to do things better. There was no rush, no shouting, just patient instruction that made him feel respected, not judged. During a short break, Eli stood by the window and looked outside. The street seemed different now, less hostile and empty. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere, even if only temporarily. He watched a mother helping her child tie their shoes and felt a pang of longing for the kind of care and support he had never truly known. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining a life where people looked out for him, where he could feel safe and valued. The woman approached him, carrying a tray with a small sandwich, some fruit, and a cup of tea. She placed it gently in front of him and said, "You've been working hard. Eat. You deserve it." Eli stared at the food, almost unable to believe his luck. The sandwich was simple, but it was warm and smelled wonderful. He thanked her, his voice thick with emotion, and took a bite. The taste was almost magical, not just because it was food, but because it symbolized something far greater: kindness, compassion, and the possibility of a better day. As he ate, Eli glanced at the woman's hands. They were strong, with faint scars and calluses, but there was a softness to them as well. They moved with purpose and care, handling each object as if it had value beyond its material worth. He realized that these hands had seen hard work, struggle, and probably pain, yet they had also given comfort, built something meaningful, and nurtured life in their own quiet way. There was a story in them, a story he felt he was only beginning to understand. Eli's mind wandered as he ate, thinking about the life he had left behind and the uncertain future ahead. The woman continued her work silently, moving from table to table, cleaning and arranging with care. There was something in her presence that felt grounding, as if being around her could steady his own unsteady heart. He realized he had been alone for so long, but here he wasn't invisible. Here someone saw him not just as a hungry stranger, but as a person worthy of attention and care. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Eli washed dishes until his hands were pruned and sore, swept floors until his arms ached, and learned the rhythm of the cafe. Each task taught him something about patience, about focus, and about the quiet dignity of honest work. He was exhausted, but it was a different kind of tired, one that came from doing something meaningful, not from merely surviving. As the evening drew near, the woman called him over and gave him a small bowl of soup. She sat across from him, her eyes studying him kindly. "You did well today," she said simply. Eli felt a lump in his throat, unable to find the words to express the mixture of gratitude and hope swelling inside him. He realized that this was more than a meal or a job. It was a chance to start again, to feel that he had value and purpose. Eli left the cafe that night with a full stomach and a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. He knew that life outside was still difficult, that challenges awaited him at every turn, but for the first time he felt a spark of hope. He had been seen, and for now that was enough. Walking back to the streets, he promised himself he would return the next day, not just for food, but to learn, to grow, and perhaps to find a place where he could finally belong. The night was cold, but Eli felt warmth within, a small flame of possibility that refused to be extinguished. The next morning, Eli returned to the cafe with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The cold air hit him as he walked up the street, but inside the warmth of the cafe welcomed him like an old friend. The woman was already busy arranging pastries behind the counter, her hands moving with the same careful precision he had noticed the day before. She glanced up and gave him a nod, a silent acknowledgement that made him feel both welcomed and expected. He quickly put on the apron she handed him and got to work, starting with wiping down the tables. Each motion felt more familiar now, less awkward than the first day. The rhythm of the cafe, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, the soft murmur of music, created a strange sense of comfort. Eli found himself becoming part of the flow, not just a stranger doing chores. He felt that with each sweep of the broom, each polished glass, he was also sweeping away some of the weight he had carried for so long. While he worked, he watched the woman move around the cafe. Her hands caught his attention again. They were strong and capable, but there was a gentleness in the way she touched things. When she picked up a cup, she held it carefully as if she were aware of its fragility. When she straightened a napkin or folded a piece of bread in a basket, she did it with attention and respect. Eli couldn't help but marvel at how hands could tell a story. These hands had clearly worked hard for many years, yet they moved with such grace and thoughtfulness. He wondered what other stories they held, what experiences had shaped the person behind them. A young girl came in with her mother, and Eli watched as the woman served them. She spoke softly, smiling at the child, and made sure the little one's needs were met. There was no rush, no impatience, just a steady calm that seemed to wrap around everyone in the room. Eli realized that her hands, while strong, were also hands of care and protection. They could build, create, and heal. The contrast fascinated him. He had seen hands like these before, but never so openly intertwined with kindness and strength. As the day went on, Eli found himself learning more than just the tasks. He began to notice small things, how the woman anticipated what the customers needed, how she arranged food so it looked inviting, and how she handled complaints with quiet dignity. He started to understand that running a cafe wasn't just about cooking or cleaning. It was about patience, observation, and understanding human needs. Every movement she made seemed intentional, teaching him lessons without words. During a slow moment in the afternoon, she called him over to the counter. She handed him a small cutting board and a knife. "Try slicing these vegetables," she instructed. Eli took the knife cautiously, his hand shaking slightly. But with her gentle guidance, he found a rhythm. He realized that mistakes were not met with anger, only correction and encouragement. For someone who had spent so much of his life being told he wasn't enough, this was a revelation. He felt respected, capable, and most importantly, human. Lunch hour brought a rush of customers, and Eli found himself running between tables, carrying plates and refilling drinks. His muscles ached, and his body was tired in a way that made him feel alive rather than drained. Each action, no matter how small, had a purpose. The woman occasionally checked on him, offering advice or a nod of approval, and each gesture gave him a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. When the rush subsided, she handed him a small cloth and asked him to clean the windows. As he scrubbed the glass, he looked outside at the world bustling past. People hurried along, immersed in their own lives, oblivious to the struggles around them. Eli felt a strange mix of envy and hope. He envied their stability, but he also realized that he was beginning to build something of his own, small but meaningful. The woman's hands came to his mind again, and he thought about the countless times they had probably faced similar struggles and continued anyway. Later in the afternoon, she asked him to help organize the storage area. It was dusty and cramped, filled with boxes and supplies that had been neglected. As they worked together, she shared bits of her own life story. She spoke about hardships, moments of doubt, and people who had helped her along the way. Her voice was calm, almost like a teacher's, but the words carried weight. Eli listened intently, feeling a connection that went beyond the tasks at hand. He began to understand that the cafe was not just a place to earn food. It was a space where stories, struggles, and lessons intersected. At one point, Eli accidentally knocked over a small jar of spices. It clattered to the floor and broke, sending a sharp scent into the air. His heart sank, expecting a harsh reaction. But she simply smiled and said, "It's all right. Accidents happen. Just clean it up carefully." The relief and gratitude he felt were immense. He realized that this woman had an unusual ability to see potential rather than failure, to encourage rather than punish. Her hands, strong and experienced, were not just tools. They were symbols of guidance and protection. As the day drew to a close, Eli was given a plate of warm food. He sat quietly, savoring each bite while the woman went about closing the cafe. She didn't hover or ask him to rush. She simply worked alongside him when necessary, letting him feel capable. There was a rhythm to her movements, a natural authority that was comforting rather than intimidating. Eli felt a strange mixture of admiration and awe. He understood that this was more than a job. It was a place to learn, to grow, and perhaps to find the stability he had been missing. He noticed little things that day: the way she cleaned the counter with deliberate care, the way she handled cash with precision, the way she listened when someone spoke, truly listened. Each small action carried lessons in patience, responsibility, and kindness. Eli realized that her hands, which he had noticed so much, were a reflection of her character. They told a story of perseverance, of compassion, and of unwavering strength. When it was finally time to leave, the woman handed him a small package of food to take home. She looked at him with a soft, knowing smile, and Eli felt a lump form in his throat. He realized that her actions had given him something more than food. They had given him hope. As he stepped out into the evening air, the chill of the world felt less harsh. He walked home slowly, thinking about the day, the woman, and the hands that had inspired him. Eli understood that he was starting a new chapter, one that would not be easy, but one that held possibility. The cafe was not just a place to survive. It was a place to begin living again. Each day he learned more, worked harder, and felt a growing sense of belonging. The woman's hands had shown him that kindness and strength could coexist, that patience could teach lessons more powerful than words, and that even in hardship there was room for hope. That night, as he lay down on a bench in the small park near the cafe, Eli thought about the woman and her hands. He imagined all the years they had worked, all the challenges they had faced, and how they had arrived at this moment to guide him. Sleep came slowly, but for the first time in a long while it was peaceful. Tomorrow would bring more work, more lessons, and more small victories, but Eli felt ready. He had tasted not only food, but also the beginning of a new life, and that was more sustaining than anything else he had known. Eli arrived at the cafe the following morning, feeling a little more confident. He had started to understand the rhythm of the place, and his body remembered the tasks that had been awkward and difficult before. He tied his apron, adjusted the straps carefully, and stepped behind the counter with a sense of purpose. The woman was already there, arranging fresh pastries on a tray. She glanced at him and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. the kind of quiet approval that made him feel seen and respected. He began by sweeping the floor, noticing how each movement was smoother than the day before. The broom glided across the tiles, and he felt a small sense of pride in doing something well. As he worked, he noticed the woman moving about the cafe with grace, her hands deftly managing tasks that seemed ordinary but carried depth. She moved from table to table, adjusting chairs, wiping crumbs, and serving customers with a calm attentiveness. Eli's eyes lingered on her hands again. They were strong and worn, yet gentle. The scars and calluses hinted at years of hard work, but the movement spoke of patience and care. A customer asked a question about the menu, and the woman responded with a soft but confident tone. Eli observed how she listened carefully before answering, how she made the person feel understood rather than rushed. He realized that this was more than serving food. It was about creating an experience, making people feel welcomed and valued. He thought about how rare it was to encounter someone who treated every interaction with such care. During a lull in business, she called Eli over and handed him a knife and some vegetables. She guided his hands gently, showing him the proper way to chop without pressure or impatience. "Take your time," she said. Eli focused, feeling the rhythm in the task. He made mistakes, of course, but each one was met with quiet correction, not frustration. He began to understand that this was a safe place to learn, where errors were part of growth and not signs of failure. As the morning went on, more customers arrived. Eli found himself running back and forth, carrying trays, refilling drinks, and clearing tables. The work was tiring, but it gave him energy in a strange way. He felt useful, part of something bigger than himself. He noticed small things about the woman, too. She never raised her voice even when the cafe became busy. Her hands moved with calm precision, and her eyes watched over the place with gentle authority. Eli realized she was teaching him more than just how to work. She was showing him how to carry himself with dignity and patience. By midday, Eli was sweating from the physical labor, but he didn't mind. The sense of accomplishment was stronger than any fatigue. The woman handed him a towel and a cup of water, a small gesture that spoke volumes. She didn't need to scold him or praise him excessively. Her actions alone communicated respect and care. Eli drank the water slowly, feeling it cool his throat and steady his nerves. He glanced at her hands once more, noticing the subtle movements as she served food, counted cash, and organized supplies. There was a story in every line, every scar, every careful motion. Later, she asked him to help with the storage room. It was cluttered and dusty, filled with boxes and supplies stacked haphazardly. Together, they moved crates, organized ingredients, and cleaned the shelves. As they worked, she spoke softly about her past. She shared moments of struggle, times when she had felt lost, and people who had helped her along the way. Eli listened intently, feeling a connection that went beyond work. Her hands had built more than just the cafe. They had shaped a life full of resilience and compassion. He felt honored to witness a small part of that story. During the afternoon rush, Eli felt the pressure of keeping up with customers, but he also felt a sense of belonging. The woman moved alongside him when necessary, guiding without hovering. Each gesture, each word made him feel capable and supported. He noticed the smiles of the customers, the way they responded to the woman's kindness, and he understood that her influence extended beyond him. She was shaping experiences, teaching lessons of patience, empathy, and quiet strength through example. After the rush, she handed him a bowl of soup and some bread. They sat briefly in silence, sharing a quiet moment amid the clatter of the cafe. Eli felt a warmth that went beyond the food. He realized that being here was changing him, teaching him more than any classroom or lecture could. The woman's hands, which he had admired since the first day, represented more than skill. They symbolized care, endurance, and guidance. He thought about how different life could be if more people offered such quiet support and patience. As the day came to a close, Eli reflected on the progress he had made. He could chop vegetables with confidence, handle trays without spilling, and manage the floor efficiently. More importantly, he felt a shift inside himself. Confidence, pride, and a sense of purpose had begun to replace the fear and despair that had dominated his life. The woman's presence had become a steadying force, her hands a constant reminder that patience, effort, and care could create change. Walking home that evening, Eli felt the weight of the day in his muscles, but also a lightness in his heart. He thought about the woman, the cafe, and the lessons hidden in ordinary tasks. He realized that life, like the work he was learning, required attention, patience, and dedication. He understood that mistakes were part of growth and that support from others could be transformative. He found a quiet bench in the park and sat down, looking up at the sky as the sun began to set. The colors of the evening were beautiful, but what filled him with warmth was the memory of the day, the woman's hands, her quiet guidance, and the small victories he had achieved. He felt hope, fragile but real for the first time in years. Tomorrow would bring more work, more learning, and more challenges. But he was ready. He had begun to see that life could offer second chances, and that kindness, even in small gestures, had the power to change someone's path forever. The next morning, Eli walked to the cafe with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The days had begun to blur together, filled with learning and quiet victories, but today felt different. He could sense a change in himself, though he couldn't quite place it. His steps were steadier, his back straighter, and there was a small flicker of hope that felt almost daring. He pushed the door open, and the warm aroma of baked goods and coffee welcomed him. The woman was arranging cups behind the counter, her hands moving with practiced precision, but her eyes briefly met his and held a soft curiosity. He began by wiping tables and sweeping floors as usual, but he noticed he was doing it with more focus and less hesitation. Each task, no matter how small, carried meaning now. He was not just earning a meal, he was learning skills, absorbing lessons about patience, responsibility, and care. As he worked, he observed the woman handling the morning rush with ease. Her hands moved quickly yet gracefully, placing plates, adjusting utensils, and guiding others without a word. Eli felt a deep admiration for her, realizing that strength and kindness could coexist in such a powerful way. A group of customers came in, and the woman greeted them warmly, making each person feel important. Eli watched closely, noticing the subtle gestures, the way she listened attentively, how she maintained eye contact, and how she used her hands to express reassurance and confidence. It struck him how much could be communicated without words, how her presence alone set the tone for the entire cafe. He felt inspired to learn from her, to carry himself with similar calm and assurance. During a brief pause, she called him over to the back room. "Eli, come here," she said softly. He walked over, his heart pounding slightly, unsure what to expect. She handed him a small bundle of papers and some receipts. "I want you to help me organize these," she explained. At first it seemed simple, but as he worked through the stacks, he realized it was more complex than he had anticipated. He made mistakes, misplacing a few receipts, but she corrected him gently, never scolding or belittling him. Eli felt a rush of gratitude. It was a simple act, yet it communicated trust and belief in his ability. As they worked together, she began to share stories from her life. She spoke of hardships she had faced as a young woman, the challenges of running a business, and moments when she had been lost and unsure of the path ahead. Her voice was calm, and Eli listened intently, absorbing every word. He realized that the cafe was not just a place to work, it was a place of mentorship, a sanctuary where life lessons were imparted through both words and actions. Her hands moving deftly among papers and supplies seemed to carry the weight of experience, and he felt privileged to witness it. The lunch rush came, and Eli was on his feet again, carrying trays, clearing tables, and assisting wherever he could. The work was tiring, but it was also invigorating. He felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The woman occasionally guided him with a nod or a gentle touch on the shoulder, and he realized how much her presence reassured him. He began to understand that support did not always need to be loud or verbal. Sometimes it was the quiet gestures, the steady hands guiding, that mattered most. After the rush, she handed him a plate of warm food and a cup of tea. They sat quietly in a corner, and for a moment, neither spoke. Eli savored the meal, feeling the warmth and nourishment fill him, not just physically but emotionally. The woman looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of wisdom and compassion. She spoke softly. "Eli, I see potential in you. I see someone who has struggled, but also someone who can grow, who can learn, who can become more than they think they are. Her words struck him deeply. He had never been told he had potential, never truly believed it himself. The warmth of her hands resting briefly on the table seemed to reinforce the sincerity of her words. Eli felt emotions welling up inside him: gratitude, disbelief, hope. He realized that this small cafe, these simple acts of trust and kindness, were changing him. He thought of all the times he had been overlooked, judged, or dismissed, and now he was being seen and valued. The woman had given him more than work. She had given him a glimpse of what life could be if nurtured with patience and care. As the afternoon wore on, the woman asked him to help with inventory. He moved through the shelves, counting items, organizing products, and noting what was running low. The work was methodical, requiring attention and focus, but Eli found himself enjoying it. Each task reinforced the lessons he had been learning: the importance of responsibility, diligence, and attention to detail. He began to understand that these skills were not just about the cafe, they were lessons for life itself. When the day was nearly over, she called him to the counter once more. "Eli," she said gently, "I want you to know that your efforts here have not gone unnoticed. You have shown dedication, patience, and a willingness to learn. These qualities are rare, and I want to help you continue growing." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the kindness and belief she had shown him. It was more than he had ever hoped for. Her hands once again moved with purpose and care, stacking plates, wiping the counter. Yet there was a sense of mentorship in every motion. She made him an offer, something he had not expected. "Eli, I want to offer you a stable position here, with fair pay and guidance to help you build a better future. You don't have to worry about your meals anymore, and you can focus on learning and growing. I believe in you." Eli felt tears prick at his eyes. He had come to the cafe desperate for a meal, for temporary relief from hunger. Now, he was being offered a chance to start over, to rebuild his life with support and trust. It was overwhelming, almost too much to comprehend. He accepted the offer quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, ma'am. I don't know what to say." She smiled softly, placing her hands briefly on his shoulders, a gesture that carried reassurance and encouragement. Eli felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The path ahead would not be easy, but he no longer felt alone. He had been given a second chance, a chance to work, to learn, and to grow. As he left the cafe that evening, carrying a small package of food and a heart full of hope, Eli reflected on the journey so far. The woman's hands, her guidance, and her belief in him had changed something deep inside. He felt a new sense of purpose and responsibility. Life had given him hardships, yes, but it had also given him a place where he could begin again, where he could find meaning, dignity, and hope. Walking home under the soft glow of the streetlights, Eli felt warmth in his chest, knowing that tomorrow, and every day after, would bring new opportunities to learn, grow, and create a life he had never thought possible. Eli arrived at the cafe early the next morning, feeling a mixture of anticipation and determination. He had grown used to the routine, yet today carried a sense of significance he could not explain. The air was crisp, and the street outside was quiet. But inside the cafe, the warmth and gentle aroma of baked goods greeted him like an embrace. The woman was arranging items behind the counter, her movements deliberate and calm. She glanced at him briefly and nodded, a gesture that carried acknowledgement and quiet trust. He put on his apron and started with sweeping and wiping tables, each movement more confident than the day before. The rhythm of the cafe, the gentle murmur of conversations, and the occasional clatter of dishes felt comforting. Eli realized that he was no longer just a helper. He was part of the place, part of the rhythm, part of the learning that had slowly transformed him. He began noticing subtle details, the way customers interacted, the patterns of service, and the little adjustments the woman made to ensure everyone felt welcomed. During a quiet moment, she asked him to assist in preparing some pastries. He followed her instructions carefully, measuring ingredients and mixing them with focus. She moved alongside him, guiding his hands gently, showing how to fold dough and handle delicate items. Eli marveled at her patience and precision. The hands that had once seemed ordinary were extraordinary in their capacity to teach, to guide, and to inspire. He felt a deep respect for her, understanding that experience and care combined could create more than just food. It could shape people's lives. Throughout the morning, Eli encountered tasks he had never done before. He handled the register, served customers, and organized inventory. Each new responsibility felt challenging, yet he embraced them with determination. The woman offered guidance when necessary, but also gave him space to learn from his mistakes. This approach taught him more than skill. It taught him resilience, problem-solving, and confidence. He realized that the cafe was more than a workplace. It was a space where he could rebuild his sense of self-worth. The lunch rush brought a flurry of activity. Eli moved quickly, carrying trays and clearing tables, feeling a strange mix of fatigue and exhilaration. The woman stayed close, guiding without dominating, encouraging without demanding. He noticed how her hands moved seamlessly, adjusting plates, pouring drinks, and offering small gestures of reassurance to the customers. Every motion was deliberate and kind, teaching him the power of presence and intention. Eli felt inspired to emulate that calm strength in his own actions. As the rush subsided, she handed him a plate of food and a cup of tea. They sat together for a moment, enjoying the quiet between the storms of activity. She spoke softly, sharing more stories of her past struggles and triumphs. Eli listened intently, absorbing each word. He understood that the lessons were not only about work but also about life, the importance of perseverance, empathy, and integrity. Her hands rested briefly on the table, a gesture that seemed to transmit encouragement and understanding without words. In the afternoon, she asked Eli to help plan for a new set of supplies. They went through boxes, noted what was needed, and discussed ways to improve efficiency. Eli noticed how methodical she was, how every decision was considered, and how she balanced care for her staff with care for her customers. He realized that these skills extended beyond the cafe. They were skills for life. He felt proud to contribute, knowing his efforts mattered and that he was trusted to handle responsibilities he had never imagined he could. Later, a difficult customer entered the cafe, complaining about a minor mistake in an order. Eli felt his heart race, unsure of how to respond. The woman moved calmly, addressing the complaint with patience and tact. Eli observed closely, noticing how her words were gentle but firm, how her hands guided the situation, and how her demeanor diffused tension. He understood that leadership was not about authority alone, but about presence, understanding, and compassion. It was a lesson he would carry with him long after the cafe's doors closed. As the evening approached, the cafe quieted. Eli felt a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. He had worked hard, learned much, and experienced moments of genuine connection. The woman called him over and spoke quietly, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and encouragement. Eli, you have come a long way. You have shown dedication, resilience, and the ability to learn. I see in you the strength to continue growing. This cafe is yours to learn from, and I will help guide you as you build your future. His throat tightened with emotion. The offer was more than a job. It was a lifeline, a chance to shape his destiny with guidance and support. Eli accepted with a quiet nod, gratitude and hope filling his chest. He realized that the woman's hands, which had guided, taught, and comforted him from the beginning, had changed the trajectory of his life. The cafe had become more than a place to earn food. It had become a sanctuary of learning, growth, and human connection. He understood that life's challenges could be met with patience, care, and determination, and that even small acts of kindness could alter the course of a person's future. As he left the cafe that evening, carrying a small meal to take home, Eli felt a profound sense of purpose. The streets no longer seemed hostile. The cold no longer bit as sharply. He had discovered a place where he was seen, valued, and nurtured. He walked slowly, reflecting on the journey he had taken, from a hungry, uncertain stranger to a young man filled with hope and direction. He knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but he no longer faced them alone. That night, Eli lay on a bench under the stars, thinking about the woman and her hands. Every scar, every line, every movement told a story of strength, care, and resilience. He felt inspired to carry those lessons forward, not only in his work but in the way he lived his life. For the first time in many years, he felt secure, capable, and hopeful. The journey had been long and difficult, but he had found a place where second chances were real, kindness was tangible, and the path to a better future was illuminated by patience and care. Eli drifted to sleep with a sense of peace, ready to embrace each new day with gratitude, determination, and the quiet confidence that life could indeed be transformed by the simple acts of another human being. Eli woke up early the next morning with a sense of determination. The streets were still quiet, and the soft light of dawn painted everything in a gentle glow. He carried with him the lessons of the past weeks, the patience, care, and trust the woman had shown him, and he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. He walked to the cafe, the familiar aroma of coffee and fresh bread greeting him as soon as he stepped inside. The woman was already busy behind the counter, moving with the quiet grace that had always fascinated him. She looked up and nodded, a simple gesture that conveyed trust, approval, and encouragement. He tied his apron tightly and began his work, starting with sweeping the floor and wiping tables. The motions were familiar now, almost automatic, but each movement carried meaning. Eli felt proud of the progress he had made, and aware of how far he had come. He noticed the customers entering, some regulars who greeted him warmly, and some new faces curious about the bustling little cafe. Each interaction reminded him of how much he had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence, patience, and understanding. The woman called him over to help prepare the breakfast menu. She handed him utensils and ingredients with calm precision, guiding him gently as he followed her instructions. Eli noticed the care with which she handled each task, the way her hands moved deliberately, conveying not only skill but also a sense of purpose and responsibility. He began to understand that her work was more than mechanical. It was thoughtful, intentional, and full of respect for both the process and the people around her. Every gesture had meaning, and he felt inspired to mirror that in his own actions. As the morning progressed, the cafe filled with customers. Eli carried trays, refilled drinks, and cleared tables with increasing confidence. The work was demanding, but it also energized him. He felt capable, respected, and appreciated for his efforts. The woman moved among the staff and customers, offering guidance, correcting gently, and modeling patience and empathy. Eli paid close attention, learning not just the tasks but the deeper lessons of responsibility, kindness, and communication. He began to realize that running the cafe was more than a job. It was a way to connect with people, to teach and inspire, and to build a community. During a lull, she called him to the side and handed him a small notebook. "I want you to start keeping track of our inventory and expenses," she explained. Eli's heart raced slightly at the responsibility. He had never managed such tasks before, but her calm voice and encouraging smile gave him confidence. He opened the notebook and began recording the items, noting what was available and what needed restocking. The work required focus, attention to detail, and patience, all of which Eli had been cultivating. As he worked, the woman observed quietly, occasionally offering guidance but mostly letting him take ownership of the task. He felt a sense of pride and accomplishment unlike anything he had experienced before. A difficult situation arose when a customer complained about a mistake in their order. Eli felt a surge of anxiety, but the woman stepped in calmly. She listened to the complaint, acknowledged the issue, and resolved it with grace. Eli watched closely, absorbing her method of handling conflict without anger or frustration. He realized that leadership, empathy, and calm problem-solving were just as important as technical skill. He made a mental note to remember this approach for future challenges, understanding that the way one responds to adversity can define the experience for everyone involved. After the lunch rush, she handed him a small meal and a cup of tea. They sat together quietly for a few minutes, the soft hum of the cafe around them. She spoke gently about her experiences, sharing lessons about resilience, patience, and the value of hard work. Eli listened intently, absorbing not only her words but the way she lived them. He realized that her guidance extended beyond the cafe. It was a lesson for life itself. Her hands, steady and strong, had shaped not only the cafe but also the people within it. They had guided him, nurtured him, and given him the confidence to grow. In the afternoon, Eli helped organize supplies and plan for the next day. He carefully noted what was needed, stacked boxes, and arranged items efficiently. The tasks were simple but essential, requiring focus and responsibility. He felt satisfaction in completing them, and a sense of belonging in contributing meaningfully. The woman moved among the customers, interacting with them warmly, and Eli observed her effortlessly balancing attention to people with attention to the work at hand. He realized that her example was teaching him how to integrate skill, patience, and empathy in every action. Later, the woman asked him to assist in creating a small budget for the cafe. Eli hesitated briefly, unsure if he could handle the responsibility, but she reassured him with a kind smile. He worked carefully, calculating expenses and anticipating needs, and the woman guided him when necessary, offering advice without taking over. He felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. The tasks he had once considered overwhelming were now manageable, and he understood that this growth was the result of both his efforts and the mentorship he had received. As the evening approached, the cafe quieted. Eli reflected on the progress he had made, not only in his skills but also in his confidence, patience, and ability to connect with others. The woman called him over once more, her eyes reflecting pride and encouragement. "Eli," she said softly, "you have grown so much. I see someone who has struggled but has also shown the capacity to learn, adapt, and thrive. I am proud of your progress, and I believe you have a bright future ahead. Keep working, keep learning, and remember the lessons you have learned here." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by gratitude and hope. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen and valued. He accepted her words quietly, feeling a deep sense of commitment to continue growing and learning. He realized that the woman's hands, which had guided him from the first day, symbolized more than skill. They represented care, patience, resilience, and belief in the potential of others. He understood that life's challenges could be met with perseverance and guidance, and that even small acts of kindness could transform someone's path. As Eli left the cafe that evening, he felt a profound sense of purpose. The streets seemed less harsh, and the night air carried a gentle promise of new beginnings. He thought about the journey he had taken, from a hungry, uncertain stranger to a young man filled with hope, skill, and confidence. He knew challenges would continue to come, but he no longer felt alone. The lessons, guidance, and example of the woman had given him tools to face the future with courage and determination. Sitting on a quiet bench under the stars, Eli reflected on everything he had learned. The woman's hand, steady and strong, had changed his life. They had guided him, nurtured him, and shown him the value of patience, kindness, and hard work. He felt inspired to carry those lessons forward in every aspect of his life. The cafe had become more than a workplace. It was a place of growth, learning, and connection. Eli drifted to sleep with a sense of peace and hope, ready to embrace the days ahead with gratitude, determination, and the confidence that life could be transformed by compassion, guidance, and the belief that every person has the potential for a fresh start.